Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome to the Crack House Chronicles. I am Donnie, your host, and with me is a man who is really thankful for all this snow we're getting because he's been waiting for a legitimate reason to wear his fur bikini. It's Dale.
Hey, man, what's going on? Yeah, it is time for that stuff. I've been wanting to break those suckers out for a while, and now we've got a couple snows, and I'm ready to rock.
All right. Dale, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you we've got a awesome case this week, and we're just going to go ahead and get into it. We are covering the disappearance of Cathy Marie Moulton. Now, she went missing, Dale, on September the 24th, 1971 in Portland, Maine. Today, we have a special guest with us on the podcast. His name is Kevin Cady. He is a retired deputy police chief from Portland, Maine. He also has a lot of acronyms past his name.
He's done it all.
He has done a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm just going to run down some things that he is, some of his credentials. He is on the Joint Terrorist Task Force, Internal Affairs Investigator for the President of the United States and Vice President. Site Commander, he is, and Shift Command. He is also employed as a United States Customs Inspector and Special Deputy U.S. Marshal. And at the end of this podcast, Kevin is going to give us a rundown. He wrote a book, and basically he wrote the book on this case, Dale.
He did, yeah, because there's not much out there except for what he's done, and he's really busted his ass in this
yeah,
case.
He wrote a book about this girl that's missing, Cathy Moulton, and he will give a plug at the end of it, and we'll give all the information in case anybody wants to.
Yeah, he was on this police force working for over 25 years, so he's really done a lot outside of that on this case.
And we're really fortunate to have him on this show today. I can't thank him enough.
I know.
It's all right. Awesome. Yeah, Kevin, thank you. Welcome to the podcast. My partner's here with me, Dale.
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good. Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. This is Dale. Just nice to meet you.
All right, Kevin, I know before we get started, tell us a little bit about you and some of your background. I know you've got a lot of acronyms after your name, so tell us a little bit about you before we get started.
Which acronyms?
I know you're the retired police chief, deputy police chief there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was with Portland Police for 20 years. I was a detective sergeant. So after 20 years, I went to over to the town next to Portland, Maine, and that's Falmouth. And I was the harbormaster. Law enforcement harbormaster, and then I went. I was there for a couple of years, and I went down to south to Eliot, where I was the deputy police chief. So in total, I did 25 years of law enforcement. I'm retired to pension, and that was going on 10 years ago this summer. So,
wow.
Yeah. Since then, I actually have a hockey background as well. Prior to becoming a police officer, I was the equipment manager for the Philadelphia Flyers.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That was actually I was with the organization for 9 seasons total. I started when I was 14 in Portland with the AHL farm team, and then when I retired in 2009-10, I was the equipment manager in Portland with the Portland Pirates, and they were the Buffalo Sabres AAA team. So I worked for the Buffalo Sabres for 3 seasons there, and then since then I've been doing private investigations and contract, background investigations with OPM, the federal government, and so that's where we're at.
That's pretty awesome, dude.
Yeah, no doubt.
Let's start with in 1971, September of 1971, the day Cathy went missing.
Yep.
Let's talk about that for just a little while.
Okay.
She was supposed to go to a dance that night. Is that correct? A
YWCA? September 24th, 71. It was the YWCA in downtown Portland.
Uh-huh. From what I've read and everything I've heard, she was supposed to meet some friends there that night. Is that correct, too? And
yes. Yep.
Okay. Her dad took her to downtown Portland, and I think she was supposed to buy her some pantyhose and some toothpaste her mother gave her some money for. Is that correct?
That's true, yeah.
And I think her her mother gave her some money to take the bus back home. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And her house was probably a mile away.
Yeah, I've read him. Yeah.
Yep.
And she had told her friend there when she stopped in the music store after she had bought her pantyhose and her toothpaste that she had spent her money that her mama gave her for the bus ride. And she was going to walk home.
Yeah, and that was Carol Starboard at Starboard Music.
Yeah.
On Forest Avenue in Portland.
And we actually looked, and Starboard Music is still there, by the way.
It's in a different location, though.
Oh, is it? Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah, this one was in on Forest Avenue near Congress Street, which runs down the spine of the peninsula of Portland, downtown.
Mm-hmm.
They later moved out towards Cathy's house, maybe 3/4 of a mile away.
Uh-huh.
From the original place.
Okay, cool.
I've always wondered too, Kevin, what did she spend that money on that she was supposed to have the bus ride with? Has anybody ever asked that? I didn't know.
Well, I don't think anybody knows specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it probably wouldn't have been much, would it?
It probably wouldn't have been much, but I've always wondered, if she'd have spent it on something, would she have had something else in her pocketbook or her little, something else on her to identify her by? That's what I've always wondered.
Yeah, so I know that she was smoking cigarettes, unbeknownst to her parents, hiding it. And that's just a speculation. Maybe it was cigarettes, but I don't know that.
Okay. Yeah, I'd heard that she had taken up smoking too, and I heard that Cathy was kind of on the rebellious side in a way. I don't know, from a lot more kids back then at that early age smoked than they do now, I think. And did her parents know that she smoked?
No,
they didn't. Okay.
They didn't know then. No.
No, they knew afterwards, I guess. When she told Carol there at the music store that she was going to see her that night at the dance.
Yep.
Has Carol been interviewed a lot about this, as far as all the details she knew about Cathy, and did she seem out of sorts in any way, or?
No, she didn't. Yeah, we interviewed Carol Starboard, and she just recalled back to that time and seeing just briefly Cathy. She's the last sighting in Portland is Carol Starboard.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but wasn't out of sorts at all. Was happy. Gonna head home, have dinner, and then go back into downtown for that dance.
Yeah. Now, when she left the music store, she was headed home, and her house was a little over a mile away. And there was a sighting of Cathy getting into a Cadillac. Was that sighting ever confirmed?
Was it actually a sighting of her getting into a Cadillac or into a car?
I've read both. Can you confirm which it was? Was it?
I don't think it was a Cadillac per se. There was supposedly a sighting of her getting into a vehicle, still towards downtown in the that Forest Avenue area of Portland. I don't think it was I don't think we had that information about a Cadillac. The Cadillac came up later on during the investigation.
Okay.
Our investigation.
All right. That's probably what the two different reports, because some articles I've read said it was a Cadillac, and others said it was just a car, and I guess that's just misreporting there. Now, a lot of people claim that this was a man named Lester Everett. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about him and what you know as far as a little bit about Lester's background?
So Lester was, I I'm thinking back to maybe 22 or 23 years old at the time.
And Cathy was 16 at the time.
16, yeah. And her parents didn't know, but Cathy was in a sort of a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a couple of things going on with her that the parents didn't know, and that was one of them, and the smoking was the other. So Lester Everett was kind of a guy that got in trouble a bit with the police, and was kind of a rough guy, and Cathy had her home life was fairly disciplined. The dad was a disciplinarian,
mm-hmm.
and it's almost like she was starting to act out a little bit. At 16, she was doing things that her parents would not approve of.
Exactly.
So so it's like Lester's brother Mark. Later on, a few years later, the police were trying to. I think the police were trying to arrest him. Actually, not far from Cathy's house, and went out in the middle of the street and shot himself and killed himself.
Wow.
Ooh.
That's the type of family that they were. So,
mm-hmm.
So that kind of paints the picture a little bit of Lester Everett.
So I guess Cathy acting out a little bit and saw him as, I don't know, a rebel type guy, somebody that,
yep.
Yeah.
He probably thought that was cool hanging out with him.
An older guy with a car. Yeah.
Cigarettes. That's probably where all that started.
Exactly. She had supposedly got in the car with Lester.
No, Lester picked her up, and then they stopped and picked up a hitchhiker, and that turned out to be Reed Purley.
Yeah.
Lester didn't know him. It was Reed Purley, so it wasn't picking up a friend.
Oh, okay.
Reed Purley was not a friend. He didn't know him prior.
So he didn't know him prior, but Reed Purley was just a hitchhiker that needed a ride.
Yeah, because Reed Purley back then was sort of a vagabond. He was out. He hitchhiked down to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and hang out with with a Native American group down in Cambridge, Somerville, that area,
mm-hmm.
Massachusetts. He also traveled all over the United States and all over Canada. It's at different points, but he did spend a lot of time in Cambridge.
Okay. Now, he told Cathy he was going to take him to wherever he needed to go, and Cathy was Cathy was pretty much along for the ride at that moment.
Right. So he said he was headed to, up to the Tobic Reservation in New Brunswick, which is like 4.5, 5 hours away.
Uh-huh. Wow.
And they just got in and Lester said, well, let's go. We're going to bring him there. And off they went. And I mean, we don't know at this point whether, she wanted to be dropped off at home. We don't know if she said, let me out. She just was there.
Yeah. So I guess at this point, there was a sighting of Cathy at a gas station with two men, or two boys, I should say. And
yeah, but back up, because there was a sighting. Her neighbor spotted Cathy, Reed Purley, and Lester Everett at a mall in Bangor.
Okay.
The next day. That was the next day.
Oh wow.
And she's sure, I can't remember the name offhand of that neighbor, but she lives like 3 doors up from Cathy.
Mm-hmm. So she'd traveled a good ways from the house, from Portland, and went to Bangor. Now,
yeah, she was up there in Bangor and happened to see her, and that in turn got the parents. They found out about that later, a few days later, and that's why Cathy's parents went north. They had there's other reasons, but they had that she was at least in Bangor at one point, and then they later learned possibly way up into Aroostook County, northern Maine.
Okay. Did the neighbor that saw Cathy with Lester and Reed, did she say that she seemed distressed or out of sorts
No.
in any way?
No.
Like she wanted to be there?
Yeah, she just saw her and didn't see anything out of the ordinary other than she thought it was odd that she was up in Bangor with these two guys.
Yeah. That right there just blows my mind because I mean she had every intention of going to that dance that night, and to do a 180 to get into a car
and go the other way.
Yeah, I don't know if Lester told her that he was going to take her home afterwards. Do you have any indication of that?
We don't know that.
Yeah.
No, we have no way of knowing that. Reed Burley is the only one in the car, and he wasn't real forthcoming with us except to say that he was in that car, and Lester brought him up back in '71.
Okay. Now, the next sighting of Cathy was...
It was in Fort Fairfield, Maine, at a gas station. It was Don Logan, who was working there at the time. I think he was a mechanic.
Uh-huh.
And Don, we interviewed Don Logan. He's a helicopter pilot, or was a helicopter pilot during the mid-'90s in Connecticut. But he's crystal clear that it was Cathy and we believe to be Reed Burley. It makes sense. And Reed Burley had her very close and one hand on her neck and was like escorting her to the bathroom and then back to the car. Like his description is so she couldn't take off, or he thought it was that strange back then that that happened. And he later identified Cathy because the sheriff's department. Ed Green was a detective. We have interviewed him. Ed Green said that he showed Cathy's picture to Don Logan, and he said that was her. So.
Okay, pretty confirmed sighting.
In that Cadillac, that's the other part. The big thing about the Cadillac, it was a 1963 Cadillac, and everybody that we talked to that had some input into this up that way remembered that Cadillac because it was so distinctive. And that was stolen, by the way. It was stolen from the Davis Motel in Falmouth, where Lester was doing odd jobs for the motel in Falmouth.
So that's all Lester ever did was just odd jobs around. Is that right?
Yeah.
Sort of a handyman, whatever he could find, I guess.
Yep.
So when I got a question. So when they went to the bathroom there, do you think it was like they was just going there to make sure she didn't go anywhere, or so they were just going to make sure nobody bothered her, like an escort, or was it more like he was just keeping his eye on her, like he thought she might run away?
They actually went there and bought tires for the vehicle, and they used the credit card from the Davis Motel that was in the vehicle to buy the tires, which is how the sheriff's department back in '71 went there, because the next month the Davis Motel received their credit card bill, and it said tires at Fort Fairfield at this gas station, and so that's what got that going. So that's why they were there. So they were there for a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a connection to that gas station.
Was the credit card used in any other places?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That was the only one that we could determine. Our big problem is Portland police did not do any investigation back in 1971. There was there was some aspect, if you recall in the book, that that her dad went in and raised a ruckus with the police chief and got the police chief to talk to the state police, because back then the state police wouldn't talk to Portland police, they wouldn't talk to anybody else. They thought that they were the only law enforcement agency in the state, and didn't send out like when they put out this all points bulletin for Cathy, it only went to the state troopers. It never went to any other department.
They almost thought she was a runaway, didn't they?
Yeah, they said, "Oh, she'll be back. Just sit tight. she'll be home, and they never really did any follow up investigation. So going back now, I mean, there's the Davis Motel is long gone, and she's the owners are passed away. So it's not like we could go and just talk to them and say, hey, what else was taken on the from the credit card. So
exactly,
all we know is tires.
Okay, I just didn't know if it was used around town anywhere else.
That's a good question.
Yeah. After that sighting there at the gas station to get the tires and everything, where was Cathy spotted again? Where was her next sighting?
At the on a potato farm in Mars Hill.
Okay. Now, this potato farm, was it Indians worked on this farm?
Yeah. So it was. They're Native Americans from the Canada side. So they came from Pequot, New Brunswick, and they came from Nova Scotia as well. So that's where they were. They go there every fall, and they pick potatoes and then go back home.
Yeah. Now, everything I've read too, and I even in your book I've read that Cathy had talked to a lot of the natives there while she was working there, and Lester had took her there to make some quick money, I guess. Is that right?
So what's the question?
Lester had taken Cathy there because he thought he could make some quick money there, work on this potato farm and get some money.
Yeah. So the potato farm, that's where we had we ended up talking with Millie Augustine. Right. So Millie Augustine was there with her sister Donna Augustine and her dad, and they were on the farm, and they were working. And she's now an attorney. Millie is, and she's crystal clear that it was Cathy, it was Lester Everett. She knew them by name, and she says that the dad would bring Cathy food because she was afraid of the Native Americans, the Indians, and would sit in the car the whole time and comb her hair. And what we do know at that point is she wanted to go home, and she was telling the dad and Billy Augustine and Donna Augustine that she wanted to go home.
And she actually thought her parents were looking for her too. She assumed that they were.
Yeah. And the parents, when they were on that farm, the parents were actually at that particular time were like 10, 15 miles away in Moulton looking for her.
That is so crazy.
They were really close.
That is crazy.
That was going on. Yeah.
Now, Cathy was sleeping in that car too, right?
Yes.
So she left a lot of, I guess, forensic stuff in that car.
Lester?
Yeah, the car that Lester had, she was sleeping in that car too, correct?
Yeah.
So she would leave a lot of forensic stuff, hair, whatever. I mean, she was in that car quite a bit.
Yep.
Whatever happened to that car?
Well, that's part of the story. So the car. I'll jump ahead. The car ended up in Georgia on blocks, and was ultimately years. We was there for years and years at Lester Everett's house in Georgia. And evidently it was crushed for scrap. 10 years later. 15 years later. Yeah.
I guess I've read too that Lester got tired of Cathy nagging all the time and complaining about wanting to go home, about her situation. Right. And he at that point, I guess he was wanting to get rid of her.
Yeah, well, yeah. So he, get rid of.
I mean,
we thought, yeah. So what he did is one day, one evening after work, and Lester was described as lazy and not pulling his weight on the farm, and always trying to get out of his work. But so he wasn't very well liked by the other workers and the Indians. But one afternoon or early evening, he left. Came back the next morning. Cathy wasn't there. Donna or Millie Augustine asked him, "Where is she?" And he said, "Oh, I dropped her off at another camp."
Yeah.
In the camp that we've confirmed that she ended up back over at the Tobit Point Reservation and with at the Burley House.
So he actually took her into Canada, right? Is that correct? Through a back road into Canada?
Yeah. It's not. I mean, the border's completely different today than it was then, as far as it was very easy to take back roads and not go through customs. But he would go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
We're told.
Okay. So I guess at this point, instead of Lester taking Cathy back to Portland and suffering the consequences of maybe a possible kidnapping and other charges, he just dumped her. He just got rid of her. Yeah. So Lester's pretty. He's a piece of work. Now, what about after she got over there to Reed Purley's place in Canada? Where was Cathy's trail after that?
Well, what's interesting, because the farm story is not quite over. That aspect. So Lester Everett, like within a few days of dropping Cathy off wherever it was, and we know now it was Tobit Point Reservation.
Mm-hmm.
He tells Billy Augustine, Donna Augustine, and Emmett Peters, who's a Native American from Nova Scotia. I think he's from Truro, Nova Scotia. He says that he has jobs lined up in Florida, picking oranges or something like that. I don't know what it was, but Donna and Millie tell us that. So they say, okay, well, they have their money from picking potatoes. Those two are 16. I think Emmett Peters is a little bit older, and they all pile into the Cadillac and they beeline it down to Florida. And they get to Florida. They cross into Jacksonville, and they pull onto the beach in it's Fernandina Beach. That's the town. And he says, "Hey, we're here." And it turns out that he didn't have anything lined up, and so they were a little upset with him that they had no jobs lined up in Florida, as he had said. But they ended up working. They did find work, and we interviewed a couple down there that had taken in Lester and Donna, Millie, and Emmett Peters. And it was like, I don't know, a month or so later, the Indians, the Peters and the Augustines get on a bus and go home.
Okay.
And that's the last. But
and Lester ends up staying in Florida, correct?
He stays in Florida for like 2 or 3 years, and then finally comes home. But he's changed. But the thing that's interesting is Donna and Millie Augustine and Emma Peters know him only as David, not Lester. He changed his name.
Yeah, I guess at that point in time, you could just call yourself something different, and it sort of throw the authorities off the trail.
I guess we don't really know why, but he's in a stolen car and all that stuff. So maybe it could have been as innocuous as that he's in a stolen Cadillac, and but he's telling them his name's David. They know him as David, not Lester.
Wow. Does Lester ever come back to Portland at any point, or does he stay in Florida?
Yeah, it was 2 years later. He comes back into town and visits, but goes back down there. He marries Darlene Dixon, and ends up obviously taking the name Everett. And we interviewed her. One of the deputy U.S. marshals went to her house in Georgia, because she ended up in Georgia, and that's of course that's when we found out that Lester had died 10 years prior to 95, 96, 97, whatever that interview was, of cancer. So there's no way we're going to talk to him. But that's when she said, "Oh yeah, that Cadillac was on blocks in the yard for 10 years." 10 years, but now it's gone.
Wow.
Wow, that could have been so much evidence in that car, sitting there on blocks for all that time.
Yep.
Yeah, and I had Lester's son. He was interviewed because he's in a Florida State Penitentiary for murder. But we did have him interviewed, and he had absolutely no information. He was, and the investigator inside the prison said, "Hey," he said, if I had information, he says, I'd give it to you. He wasn't hiding it. He feels the investigator feels fairly certain that Lester's son was being truthful and saying, I remember the Cadillac being there, but he said, I don't know anything about Cathy Moulton.
He probably never told them.
Yeah,
he probably never knew anything about that. All right.
That was the side of his dad he just didn't know anything about.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it.
That's crazy. Now,
back to her.
Back to Cathy.
Yeah, so that's the Lester story.
Right.
Now, were there any confirmed sightings of her in Canada? Anybody that you guys talked to?
Yeah, the first time we went up to the reservation, it was 2 deputy U.S. marshals and 2 of us from Portland Police, Tom Joyce and myself. Tom was investigated this with me, and so the RCMP Sergeant Norm Mazerol, we'd already kind of prepped him before we went up, and he said, "Yeah, I'll do whatever I can to help you out." And he said, "Listen, I'm going to go bring in Tony Bear Solace on the reservation." So there was a native police there, constables, unarmed, and then the RCMP was also assigned to that reservation. And they went out and brought Tony Bear Solace in to talk to us, and we showed Tony the pictures of Lester and Cathy, and he said, "Hey, that's Reed Purley's girlfriend from back then, and that's Lester Everett." He knew who he was.
Wow.
So that's kind of the eureka moment hits, and so after Tony told us she'd been around for several months, staying at the Purley household, and when Tony left, Norm Mazerol said to us, "Well, we've got a big problem here," he said, because Reed Purley is currently out on bond or bail for home invasion rape of his neighbor, and he said he's just a bad guy, real bad guy. And we started, this of course piqued our interest. That now we're on the right trail, and what we wish we had done is gone out and got Reed Purley and interviewed him on the spot. But Norm Mazerol, what he said was, look, he's got to check in to the RCMP, I don't know, once a week or whatever the time was, while he was on bail for this crime. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I'll talk to him and ask him when he comes in. So, unfortunately, we weren't there when that took place. So, Norm tells us when Reed comes in, he's shown the picture of Lester, and he says, hey, that's Lester Everett. And he says, I know him, and tells a story about, he brought me, he's been here, he brought me up, years ago, 1971, whenever, to the reservation and stayed a little bit at his house and left. And when Norm Mazerol shows a picture of Cathy, he says, "Oh, I don't know her. Never seen her before. I don't. There's no girl. No." So we know we have a lie.
Right.
Exactly.
He's lying about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we do go back and we interviewed Reed Purley, and Dave Drake was one of the deputy U.S. marshals, and I mean Dave Drake was on the Marshal Service Special Operations team, like the SWAT team, and he brought he went down to Colombia and brought drug traffickers back to the United States to be tried, and he's dealt with some really bad people, and he was in there for Reed Purley's interview, and he says he's probably one of the worst people. That he says, I just got a sense he was a real bad guy. But he tried to, he tried to get him. What'd you do with her? How'd you kill her? And he wouldn't budge. So he would never admit that Cathy was there with him.
And when did that take place? What year was that?
I'm going to guess, but 97 sounds about right.
Was Reed ever asked to take a polygraph or anything?
No, I don't believe the RCMP offered a polygraph, and he ultimately went to prison on that charge. And I think he did like 7 or 8 years on that charge.
Oh man!
It is possible he was offered. He would have no part of it. No part.
Yeah, he actually said he didn't even recognize Cathy at all.
Right, and then his sister, Reed's sister, Jacqueline Curley. It's like Jacqueline, but it's pronounced Jacqueline. She told me that Cathy was there at her house.
So everyone saw her but him, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is crazy. And so when Reed he got out of prison, was anything ever done after that as far as Cathy's case on him? After he served you said 7 to 8 years?
Yeah, it's 7 or 8 years. Yeah.
Was anything ever done with him about Cathy's case again? Was it ever brought up to him?
No.
No. That's crazy.
So that's pretty much the end of her trail.
Is that the end of her trail?
Well, no, because we fast forward to fairly recently, in the last 2 or 3 years. So I was up there 2 or 3 years ago, and I met with one of the the elders. So it's a female elder. Her name is we've never divulged her name.
Okay.
But she tells me that she saw Cathy being dragged down the street one night, late at night, by Reed Purley, and she was crying, and her friend who lived next door across the street saw the same thing, and we think that that's when Reed ended up killing her, but we don't know that. I mean, we just don't. That's just speculation.
Yeah, that's all speculation.
And maybe he didn't kill her. Maybe another relative did. Maybe somebody else did. But that's just something we don't know. Except for there was a Native American named Brent, and I'm drawing a blank on his last name, but he was with Reed Purley one day, and Reed said, I buried a girl over there at that spot. He pointed to an area near that area. And Brent, ultimately, we couldn't interview him because he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
But we're always behind the 8 ball with these people dying before we can talk to them.
Exactly.
But so that was just another indication that it was Reed. I mean, we figured he'd have to tell somebody about this.
Right.
Yeah. Now there was a hunter that came across some remains. Where was this at?
That was in Smyrna, Maine. Smyrna, Smyrna. And we tried to do a search where he told us that he found this remains of a female, and he's quite certain it was the remains of a female. The problem is back when he found this, said he found this, he tried to get the Warden Service to go back to that spot, and they did try, but it was like beginning of hunting season, and that's like the Warden's biggest, busiest time, and they sort of didn't put a lot of time into this,
Mm-hmm.
And let it go. But we did go up. I mean, the Warden Service and the state police and us, we went up and tried to take another look. We had cadaver dogs and all that stuff, and ultimately didn't we didn't find anything. And of course, it's a long time ago, so we at least try to give that effort.
Yeah. Now, there were some other, possible theories and sightings of her as far down as Boston, maybe, and Connecticut. Is that correct?
No.
They weren't. Is that just
nothing credible?
This is nothing.
Nothing
Just
credible.
just some.
No.
Just I guess people claiming to have spotted her. Because
Yeah, nothing credible.
Because Cathy had mentioned to some friends that somebody had talked to her about how nice Boston was, and Cathy said she'd like to visit there. So I didn't know.
Yeah.
But that's nothing credible on those sightings or anything. Okay.
No, and the Boston connection is Reed Burley got arrested down there and brought in on a suspicion of murder. I don't know if you remember that from the book, but
yeah,
it was Judy Campbell. So Judy Campbell is in a bar in the afternoon. Reed Burley's in the bar, and she leaves. She sort of rebuffs him for he's trying to take her out, date her, or whatever, and she leaves. He leaves right behind her, and half a block away, someone comes up from behind and slashes her throat, and she dies.
Wow.
And we talked to the detective who has the case still unsolved. They brought Reed Burley in, and for whatever reason, they didn't have enough evidence to charge him, or continue to charge him, and they let him go. But when he showed us, so the detective was actually the responding police officer that Judy Campbell dies in his arms, and he takes a look at Cathy Moulton's picture, and he shows us a picture of Judy Campbell, and they could be twins. So it was really weird.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really weird. Yeah. So did Reed Burley do it? Probably, most likely, and that's to this day. Well, the other problem with that is Judy Campbell's boyfriend was a knife salesman. Can't make this stuff up, but he was never charged, and I don't think he was there. Reed was.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go back to Cathy before her abduction. There's a couple little things I want to ask you about that. There was a point where Cathy had went to see a photographer about having some pictures taken of her.
Yeah.
I can't remember the guy's name.
Chris Church.
Yes. Was he ever questioned on anything?
Yeah, he's the first person we talked to in the case.
Okay. What did he have to say? What was his take on Cathy? Because he was actually he was a suspect at first, wasn't he?
Well, we thought when we first interviewed him, trying to think how we got on to him, but somehow it had to do with the Gate. So there was a coffee eclectic place that the coffee house called the Gate, and musicians would play there, and people would hang out there, and Cathy would go in there, and
yeah.
He ends up bringing her back to his place where he does this photo shoot, and he's really nervous when we talk to him, but ultimately he says, he hit on her, and it didn't get anywhere, but then he tells us, hey, listen, let me go back and look. He says, I know I took pictures of her, and I'll bring them to you. So, we quickly moved away from him after his interview, but he's the one that gives us those pictures that parents had never seen.
Yeah.
Here's another example of something she had done parents didn't know about.
Wow.
Yeah, they weren't. They were sort of. They weren't nudes, but they were sort of, I guess, risque, kind of, in a way.
They were all. I mean, they were not really. They were just. She's clothed the whole time and all that. There wasn't anything innocuous about that. It was pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Kevin, tell us a little bit about when you first saw Cathy's case and it was laid on your desk. When you were first presented this case.
Yeah. So Tom Joyce was the detective sergeant. He gives me the file, and it was literally like 4 pages total, and it was one missing person report that was filed by the dad, Lyman Moulton, and then later on there was a detective, Bill Deachin. He filed a report because there was a body that was found, a female body found in British Columbia, the RCMP, for whatever reason, felt that it was a good possibility that it was Cathy. However, it was the dental stuff eliminated Cathy as being the Jane Doe. So that was in that file, but after that, there was nothing.
Mm. So when you first saw Cathy's case, what was your first thoughts on it as far as how am I going to solve this? What was your initial thought?
Well, so Tom and I, when he assigned it, he assigned it to both of us. So he just said, "Hey, this is still an open case. What do you think? Let's work on it. Outside of our regular, cases, because it was still an active missing person case. Matter of fact, it's at the time it was one of the oldest in the nation for active. What became an active missing person case.
Mm-hmm.
So what I didn't think really anything negative about being assigned it. As a matter of fact, it was the challenge that I liked. So we just said, okay, well, let's call Nancy Barlow, who was her friend at the time, and I ended up calling her. She was living in North Carolina or somewhere, and that was the very first interview. Was her friend Nancy, and Nancy was supposed to go to the dance with her as well. So
Nancy Barlow, yeah.
So she gave us some insight into Cathy. Matter of fact, I think that's where some of the smoking and that stuff came from. I'm trying to think I think that's how we figured out it was Lester Everett. I think it came from her.
Okay.
That she was seeing Lester Everett on the side. Surreptitiously. So we get on.
Okay. Reed Purley, what happened to him after he got out of prison? What's some details on him? Did he stay in and out of trouble after that, or?
Yeah, he hasn't been back to prison, and he's married to a girl from Bangor, and he's got a son with her named Amadeus. I do know that as recently as a year, within the last year, I'm told he's still up to the same type of tactics with his neighbors. One's afraid to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still receiving information from that reservation all the time. Yeah.
Kevin, what would it take today to bring Cathy's murder to justice? What would it take?
Impossible without a body, because you could never prove how she died.
This is true.
When it comes to solving the case, it would have to be Reed Purley telling us what really happened, and at that point, that would just be closure. But certainly no one's going to be prosecuted for that at this point.
You'd have to bring him in on something else and just actually get him to confess to it. Put the pressure on him and get him to confess.
Yeah, but as far as he goes, he don't even know her, so he's never going to give that up.
Yeah, I mean, if someone dug up her body, and you had your skeletal remains, and there was, obviously, a crushed skull or something like that, different story.
Right.
That's why I say impossible. That would be the only way. You'd need the body. If you get the body, then you can start talking about. And the
only guy he pointed that out to is dead, right?
Lester.
Yeah, where the body's supposed to be?
I don't know if Lester doesn't know, because remember John Wayne Aceto, when we brought him in and interviewed him, he's a local kid from Portland. We bring him in, and he tells us that Lester shows up. That was when Lester showed up from Florida 2 or 3 years later, and he says to John Wayne Aceto, Lester says, "Hey, Cathy Moulton never came home." He said, "I left her up at that reservation." He says, "Well, let's go up and find out where she is," because he thought she made it home at that point. She, and that's why we're certain that Lester had nothing to do with after he left, having anything to do with Cathy's demise, because he said he felt responsible for that she never came home. So they got in the car and they drove back up to the reservation, and they pulled right up to the Purley residence. and Lester started to Mr. Tough Guy. He's gonna take these guys on. I mean, when we showed up in '97, the RCMP said, "Hey, 6 months ago we had a shootout with this family. I mean, with his brothers. That's how bad these guys are." So they show up, and the Pearly brothers, beat the hell out of Lester and steal his coat and his leather coat and his cowboy boots, and essentially they get away with the skin of their teeth, basically. So so that tells us that one, the Pearlies have something to hide. And two, Lester had nothing to do with other than leaving her there. And now he felt remorse, saying, "Oh my God!" He tells Joe Mancino, "I can't believe that this happened." And so one of the things that Wayne Aceto tells us, I mean, this is how forthcoming he was, that they ended up they went across the country. He and Lester went across the country in a car, and he even told us about robbing people for money, like in Nevada. So is it credible what he's saying? We think it's absolutely credible. So.
Wow. Just a messed up situation with them.
Yeah, sad.
Yep.
Now, Cathy's parents, they never moved. They stayed in the same house. Is that correct? They even kept the same phone number, just hoping that Cathy would call at some point.
Yeah. Ultimately, they probably moved 3 years ago to a assisted living place, sold the house. And the dad has passed away since. Past 3 years.
That is sad. Okay, Kevin, before we close out this episode, tell us about your book.
Where it can be found, where it is, and all about it, so we give you a good plug there.
So the book is on Amazon. It's called Cathy Moulton, Missing and Endangered. I have a co-author, Bill Meltzer, who's a writer. He's does a lot of hockey related stuff. The Philadelphia Flyers for one, and I happen to know him. So he's a co-author with me. And it can be found in digital form, and you can actually order the book on Amazon. Mm-hmm. Cathy Moulton, Missing and Endangered.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we'll put a link to it in the episode that we're going to drop next week on this, and I think you told me on the phone last night when we spoke, you wrote this book all from memory. Is that correct?
Yeah, I didn't have any access to the reports that we'd filed, so this is all like now I'm able to tell you almost everything from memory. So that's.
Well, it's pretty impressive, man. It really is. And,
sometimes I can't remember my own phone number, but I can. I remember this stuff. One of the things I could do as a cop is remember names and things from cases. So.
Well, Dale and I are we just do a podcast. We're just a couple of armchair detectives, but we love we love true crime, and we love solving things and being a part of it. If we can put it out there and folks listen to it, then maybe somebody will know something somewhere.
Well, the thing is, one of the reasons I wrote the book was I knew, and I probably sent 10 copies up to the reservation, and they're still handing it around.
That's good.
Even the RCMP constable that just retired, he read the book and said he told one of the friends up there that. Tell Kevin he did a good job in that book, and I said, hey, why don't you tell him to investigate the damn case? I'm like, I don't care about doing a good job on the book. You're going to help me here, and that was one of the biggest frustrations that we had, and that's if we go up there, the RCMP, they say, oh yeah, we can help you with this. We'll work on this. The last time I was up there a couple of years ago, I met with the major crimes RCMP detectives. They just do major crimes, and they were going to help me. You know, they were going to reinvestigate this. They were going to open it up as a major crime and go on that reservation. And I never heard another word about it from them.
Mm. That's a shame.
And one of the things they said was, well, who's the case detective now in Portland? And they did call. They called down, and it's a detective that I was his field training officer when he was a rookie when he first came on. But they don't have the institutional knowledge. He won't go in and read boxes and boxes of reports that we have, on file. But so really nothing's been done.
Mm-hmm. That's sad.
Matter of fact, Portland Police was on the record in the press saying, we don't consider this a Portland Police case anymore. This is the RCMP's case, and it's up to them to solve it. And which means if the RCMP is not doing anything, Portland Police aren't doing anything. No one's doing anything.
Yeah, that's a shame.
It is a
Except
shame.
us.
Especially
Except
as much
us.
as you've done, yeah.
I mean, you've done all the research for them. All they got to do is just follow through with it and get it done.
Go pick them up. Really? Wow.
Yeah. That's a shame. We need you down here to solve a cold case we have that happened about 10 miles from my home here. A little girl went missing, Aisha Degree, many years ago. Nobody knows what happened to her. It's just cold.
So where are you guys?
We are 40 miles west of Charlotte, between Shelby and Morganton, North Carolina.
Yep.
That's where Aisha went missing, between Shelby and Morganton. And they actually had a march for her today because she disappeared on February the 14th of 2000, and nobody knows anything. It's cold.
2000?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's a tough one. How much effort are they putting into it?
Now, I think they released some information a few years ago, didn't they, Dale? About a T-shirt and a backpack or something. That was some information. They were putting it out there. They were wanting to know something about it. But as far as anything lately, there's been nothing. It's cold.
Is it the state police or highway patrol, or is it local?
It's local county sheriff's department. They actually had the FBI in a couple years ago. That's when they released that information on the book bag and T-shirt that they were wanting information from. But I hadn't heard anything else.
It's up to reward, but that's about all we've done.
Yeah, I think it's $45,000 reward.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's just she disappeared in the middle of the night. Walked out of her home about 2 a.m. in a thunderstorm. She was scared of storms and scared of dogs, but she supposedly left the home about 2 a.m. and a truck driver had spotted her on the main highway out here, and that was about it. And some people think that she was maybe struck by a car, and then they didn't want to turn it in or report it, so they just took her and dumped the body and got rid of it.
But it's all hearsay.
It's all hearsay.
Wow.
But yeah, it's pretty cold. But it hit this community here really hard when it happened, and it's people every day talk about Aisha Degree in some form or another, and I'm sure they do in Portland, Maine. I mean, I'm sure Cathy's name is brought up quite a bit.
Yeah, periodically there's now the last recently they did some press on it, and they interviewed Cathy's mother, and the mother never said. I told her all this stuff. There was a point where we said, "Well, do we think the father did she show up at home and the father killed her?" Well, we don't know. I mean, we actually talked to the Massachusetts State Police. Told us to talk to this. They use a psychic, and we brought her up to Portland, and she said that she says the father killed her, and of course. There's no indication of that. We know that she didn't come home, but we did that angle. But we also, when you brought up the FBI, I forgot that we used the special agent named Steve Kives, Kives. He's with the Child Abduction Serial Killer Unit, CASQ, and they did an analysis of behavioral thing on Reed Purley and and they, it wasn't particularly helpful. But that just shows that one more angle that we tried everything. We tried everything to bring us information on this one. So
yeah,
that's what I forgot about.
So pretty much, you think Reed killed her and buried her somewhere in Canada?
I think that that's the most likely scenario. But the other part is there was during the investigation back in '97, we got a call from a deputy police chief named Boulay from Grand Falls Police Department, and he said to us, "Hey, I heard years ago that there's one of the Pearly sisters are buried in the basement of their house." And
what a messed up family. Yeah.
Yeah. So when there's a rumor, there's always a shred of proof in most rumors, right?
Right.
Especially something like that. So we can confirm that there's no sisters that are dead, and at least at the time. And so is there someone buried in the basement? The problem that we have is that house burned at one point and was rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know. I mean, that information was all given to the RCMP, and there was never. Never. I guess we didn't. Of course, there's not enough to go in and do a search warrant on a rumor, but
right.
Nothing was ever followed up on that. And now, one of the sisters lives in that house. Was kind of a tough nut to crack. I actually started talking to her on Facebook. She didn't know who I was. She figured it out after a while, but I was trying to get her to talk about Cathy,
mm-hmm.
and she never actually divulged any true information. What she said was she was going to talk to Reed, her brother, about it, and once she figured out that I was a cop, I'm the only time. It's the only time I've ever been blocked on Facebook is by her. But so anyway, she thought I was a relative of Cathy.
It changed everything when they found out you were a cop.
Yeah, he probably shut that down. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured out who it was. So.
Wow.
So yeah, that and there was another story that came out of Tolbic that. There was an uncle named Ivan Furley. His nickname was Ivan the Rapist, and that there was a big blizzard, and that Cathy was being raped by him, and she ran out into the snowstorm, and when you go back historically to the weather, there was like November 1st, there was a big blizzard, huge blizzard, and it's like there's. Is there any truth to that rumor? So that would put the suspect as Ivan the Rapist, who's dead now.
Wow.
So who knows? I mean,
yeah.
You point your finger at one person. You don't know who. All we can truly say is that Reed Purley is a person of interest in this case.
Wow.
Did he do it? I said this before. I really don't know. No one knows for sure except for him. But it could have been someone else.
Yeah.
6 years left here, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you doing this with us.
Yeah, thank you very much, man.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Be
Bye-bye.
safe.
Right. Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, Dale, we're going to get out of here. We want to thank Kevin Cady again for joining us today and telling us about Cathy Moulton.
Yeah, what an awesome insight he has to this case. It's about the only thing we could find on this case, and so thankful for him spending his time with us to help get this case out to all of you guys, and maybe we can get somebody that knows a little bit more about it, and somebody talking that knows something that hadn't been reported.
Exactly. All right, Dale, we want everyone to be safe, be careful, and always be aware of your surroundings.
Because the next episode could be about you.
This is
the Crack House Chronicles.